This is the story of how one company invented the future, looked at it, and told the inventor to keep quiet. Stephen Sasson, a 24-year-old engineer at Eastman Kodak, built the world's first digital camera in 1975, and Kodak buried it. Over the next 3 decades, the company held over 1,000 digital imaging patents, collected $3 billion licensing those patents to competitors, and even climbed to the #1 spot in American digital camera sales. None of that saved them from bankruptcy. Most people hear this story and assume Kodak never saw it coming. That version is wrong. Kodak commissioned internal reports that predicted the death of film with alarming accuracy, and they still could not rescue themselves from it. That's the real story, and it is worse than the simple version. Before you can understand how Kodak collapsed, you need to grasp just how completely they dominated. George Eastman started manufacturing photographic dry plates out of a rented loft in Rochester, New York, back in 1880. 8 years later, he had a slogan that rewired consumer photography forever. You press the button, we do the rest. When the Brownie camera arrived in 1900 at a price of $1, photography stopped being a luxury and became something every family could participate in. And then Kodachrome landed in 1935 as the first commercially successful amateur color film. 90% of film sales and 85% of camera sales in the United States belonged to Kodak by 1976. By the mid-90s, it was a spot among the top 5 most valuable brands on Earth, sitting alongside Coca-Cola, Disney, and McDonald's. Revenue peaked at roughly $16 billion in 1996, with a market capitalization that topped $31 billion, and the company employed over 145,000 people worldwide, 60,000 of them concentrated in Rochester alone, which meant Kodak accounted for roughly half that city's entire economic activity. People in Rochester called the company the Yellow Father. Wages ran above market rate, and on top of that came healthcare, recreational facilities, and an annual wage dividend of about 15% of base salary, a benefit Kodak had offered continuously since 1912. Turnover sat at only 13% in the 50s, while the national average for American manufacturers hovered around 50%. Nobody just worked at Kodak. They lived inside it. And all of this ran on one product, not cameras. Film. Kodak operated what business schools call the razors and blades model, selling cameras cheaply and then collecting enormous recurring revenue from film, chemicals, paper, and processing. Gross margins on film hovered close to 72%, and as late as 2000, film-related sales still represented 72% of Kodak's revenue and 66% of its operating income. Manufacturing the stuff required coating up to 24 layers of chemicals, each only 1 micron thick, at 300 feet per minute, all in complete darkness. Only 3 companies on the planet could pull it off: Kodak, Fujifilm, and Agfa-Gevaert. That dominance, those margins, that manufacturing complexity, and a culture built around all of it. Those are the things you need to hold in your head to understand the impossible situation created by what came next. Gareth Lloyd, a supervisor at Kodak, pulled a newly hired engineer named Stephen Sasson aside in 1974 and gave him an assignment that lasted less than 30 seconds. Lloyd wanted him to evaluate a new charge-coupled device image sensor from Fairchild Semiconductor, and he told Sasson to see what he could do with it. Nobody mentioned the word digital, and nobody told Sasson to build a camera. Sasson had joined Kodak in June of 1973, right after finishing his bachelor's and master's degrees in electrical engineering at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which made him 24 years old and almost completely invisible inside the company. Over the next year, working with virtually no oversight, he assembled something that would eventually dismantle the company that employed him. Every part of the prototype came from somewhere else. A lens pulled from a Kodak Super 8 movie camera, a Fairchild charge-coupled device sensor running at 100 by 100 pixels, which is 0.01 megapixels, a Motorola analog-to-digital converter, a dozen memory chips, a portable cassette recorder, and several dozen circuits wired together across 6 circuit boards, all powered by 16 nickel-cadmium batteries. The finished device weighed 8 pounds and took up about as much space as a toaster. Capturing an image took 50 milliseconds, recording it to cassette tape took 23 seconds, and playing it back on a television screen took another 30 seconds after that. No print came out, no film was involved, no chemicals were needed, and the images only appeared in black and white. Sasson made a deliberate choice with the cassette capacity, setting it at 30 images, a number sitting right between the 24 and 36 exposures on a standard roll of 35mm film. 1 or 2 photos would seem pointless to executives, 1,000 would confuse them, but 30 fit inside their existing mental model of what a camera did. December of 1975 produced the first digital photograph ever taken. Sasson pointed his device at a lab technician named Joy Marshall and captured a head and shoulders shot. On the first attempt, only Marshall's hair silhouette appeared while her face dissolved into static. But after about an hour of adjustments, the second attempt came through. Joy Marshall studied the image on the television screen and said it needed work. Those original photographs no longer exist because the cassette tapes were recorded over. Sasson ended up pointing a film camera at the television screen to preserve what the digital camera had captured, which means the inventor of digital photography needed film to save his own invention. Sasson brought his invention before Kodak executives in 1976, and he later described the ritual he went through each time. He would walk in with his crazy-looking camera, about the size of a toaster, but small enough to hold. He took pictures of people in the room before saying anything. Then he took out the tape that held the digital information and put it in the playback unit. When a picture popped up on the television screen, that generally got everybody's attention. That attention evaporated the moment the conversation turned practical. He recalled the pattern clearly. They did not ask how it worked. They simply asked why anyone would want to take a picture that way, when there was nothing wrong with conventional photography. Print had existed for over 100 years. Prints cost almost nothing, and nobody inside the building could imagine their customers choosing to look at photos on a television screen instead. One line captures the whole dynamic. Because it was filmless photography, management reacted by saying that it was cute, but do not tell anyone about it. Timothy Lynch, who served as Kodak's chief intellectual property officer, remembered it even more directly. Management basically told Sasson to take that box and go away, and that they did not ever want to see him again. 25 years of silence followed. Sasson said he did not talk about the camera until they asked him to in 2001, because by then digital cameras were really starting to take off as consumer items. He kept the prototype the whole time because it was too cool to throw away, and nobody cared. Written on the back of the original camera are the words, "Please return to Steve Sasson." That device now sits in the Smithsonian. When someone asked how long before digital quality could match film, he estimated 15 to 20 years, and that prediction turned out to be almost exactly right. This is the part of the story that separates it from a simple case of corporate arrogance. Kodak did not just overlook the future. They studied it, mapped it onto a timeline, and then could not bring themselves to act on any of it. A Kodak executive named Larry Madison put together a report in 1979 that predicted a complete shift from film to digital photography by approximately 2010, beginning with government and military applications and ending with everyday consumers. That prediction proved almost perfectly accurate. 2 years later, after Sony announced its Mavica electronic camera, Kodak's head of market intelligence, Vince Baraba, ran a full study of the technology's likely adoption curve. His findings confirmed that digital photography could wipe out Kodak's entire film business. But the study also estimated that Kodak still had roughly 10 years to prepare for the transition. A decade of runway, handed to them in a report backed by data. What Kodak did with that time was use digital technology to make film slightly better. The most telling product of this approach arrived in 1996, the Advantix Preview, a digital camera that still required film. It flopped completely. Everything after that played out like a long, grinding fall. Kodak turned down the chance to sponsor the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics, and Fujifilm stepped into that slot instead, gaining a permanent foothold in the American market in what many consider one of Kodak's most damaging strategic mistakes. One CEO after another tried to redirect the company and failed. George Fisher, the first outsider ever hired to run Kodak, redefined it as a pictures company rather than a film company, but rewriting the identity statement could not change 60,000 employees' entrenched habits. His successor, Daniel Karp, launched the Kodak EasyShare digital camera line and actually pushed Kodak to the #1 position in American digital camera sales by 2005, capturing 21.3% of the market. The problem was that every camera sold cost the company approximately $60 more to make than customers paid for it. Antonio Perez took over as CEO that same year and described digital cameras as a crappy business, which was accurate, but the alternative looked even worse. Under Perez, 13 film plants closed, 130 processing labs shut their doors, and 50,000 workers lost their jobs. Meanwhile, over $2 billion flowed in from patent licensing fees across 3 years, all of it coming from competitors paying Kodak for the right to use technology Kodak had invented but could not figure out how to profit from itself. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped Kodak in 2004 after listing the company since 1930. Kodachrome, the film that had been in production for 74 years, was discontinued in June of 2009. On December 30, 2010, a small shop called Dwayne's Photo in Parsons, Kansas, accepted the very last rolls of Kodachrome ever processed. The 2011 financials told a story that needed no interpretation. Kodak's film division generated $34 million in operating income, while its digital camera division hemorrhaged $349 million, roughly 10 times more than film earned. The old business was dying, and the new business was draining them even faster. January 19, 2012, brought the Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing. Eastman Kodak reported $6.75 billion in total debts against $5.1 billion in total assets, with more than 100,000 creditors listed. Judge Alan Gropper, who oversaw the case, described Kodak's collapse as a tragedy of American economic life. During the proceedings, Kodak's portfolio of 1,100 digital imaging patents sold for just $525 million, a fraction of the $2.6 billion the company had hoped for. Apple, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Samsung, and Amazon were all part of the buying consortium, which meant that nearly every major technology company on the planet was purchasing patents from the company that had created the technology all of them depended on. Shareholders received nothing. This case is now taught at Harvard Business School as a textbook example of what Clayton Christensen called the innovator's dilemma, when successful companies become prisoners of their own success, unable to embrace disruptive innovations that threaten their core business. One comparison makes all of this cut even deeper. Fujifilm sat in an almost identical position, a film company locked in a duopoly, staring down the same digital disruption. One of those two companies filed for bankruptcy. The other, led by Chief Executive Officer Shigetaka Komori, posted record revenues exceeding $21 billion in 2012, the exact same year Kodak went under. What separated them was the question each company chose to ask. Kodak kept asking how to protect what they already had. Fujifilm asked what else they could build with what they already knew. That shift in framing led Fujifilm to channel its chemical and materials expertise into healthcare, cosmetics, advanced materials, and document solutions. Healthcare now accounts for roughly 44.5% of Fujifilm's revenue, and the old imaging business represents only about 14 to 16%. September of 2013 brought Kodak out of bankruptcy as a company almost unrecognizable from the one that went in. Stephen Sasson had retired in 2009, the same year President Obama presented him with the National Medal of Technology and Innovation, and his induction into the National Inventors Hall of Fame followed in 2011. Bankruptcy changed the company forever. Roughly 3,900 people work at Kodak today, a 97% decline from the peak of 145,300. Annual revenue runs at about $1 billion. The stock trades around $6 to $7 a share, and the market cap sits at approximately $645 million, which you can compare to that peak of over $31 billion. The company that coined the phrase Kodak moment to describe something worth preserving could not preserve itself. One detail captures the full weight of this story better than any other. Kodak acquired an online photo sharing service called Ofoto back in 2001, a platform where people could upload, store, and share photos digitally. They owned it for over a decade, and the only thing they ever used it for was driving customers to order prints. The old business model grafted onto a new technology. Ofoto was underused. During the bankruptcy proceedings in April of 2012, Kodak sold Ofoto to Shutterfly for less than $25 million. That exact same month, Facebook purchased Instagram for $1 billion. Both were photo-sharing platforms, and Kodak had owned one of them. They did not just invent the digital camera and refuse to use it. They held the future of photo sharing in their hands, and they used it to sell prints.